Welcome to Enviro Close-Up. I'm Carl Grossman. With me is Ross Gelbspan. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, and he's written an extremely important book, The Heat is On. It's about global warming. It's no joke. It's affecting the planet, though there are some interests which would have us believe it's not affecting the planet. Ross, it's happening, isn't it?
It definitely is happening, Carol. There's no question about it. I think what misleads a lot of people is that they associate global warming with long, protracted heat waves. In fact, the early stages of global warming are marked by a much more unstable climate, by more severe and intense downpours, more floods and droughts and severe storms and temperature extremes and sea level rise. That is happening now. We've been seeing extreme weather events all over the planet for the last few years. Just from the beginning of this year, if I can tick off a couple, we've seen these horrendous ice and rainstorms in the Pacific Northwest. We saw the worst floods in 30 years in Bolivia that destroyed half their crops. We saw record flooding in March along the Ohio River. We had the worst winter drought in Portugal in 150 years. We had this epic flooding in the Red River in North Dakota. We've seen the worst floods in a century in Poland and Czechoslovakia. We've seen an extensive drought in Chile followed by intense rains, which dropped something like 6 months worth of rainfall in a week. And in my own hometown of Boston, we had a 60-degree Easter Sunday, followed 2 days later by a 30-inch snowstorm, which is the third biggest snowfall in Boston's history. So we're seeing much more of these extreme and disruptive weather events, and there are a number of other bodies of evidence that also indicate that it is happening now.
Why is it happening?
It is happening primarily because of the buildup of greenhouse gases, and that is primarily coal and oil emissions. The science is real simple. For the last 10,000 years, we've had the same amount of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere that has trapped in a certain amount of heat, and that has provided us a relatively stable climate. Beginning with the beginning of this century, we are starting to double that amount of carbon dioxide. There's a real close correlation between temperature and carbon dioxide increases, and basically we are each year putting up 6 billion tons of heat-trapping carbon in an atmosphere whose outer limit is only 12 miles overhead. And the consequences of that is this much more unstable climate, a lot of very troubling changes on the planet. We're seeing glaciers melting, we're seeing ocean warming, we're seeing ice shelves break off of Antarctica, we are seeing the thawing of the tundra, which for thousands of years absorbed greenhouse gases and is now releasing them. We're seeing permafrost in Siberia and Alaska melting into pea soup. And for me, one of the most striking of these changes is the fact that we've actually altered the timing of the seasons. Because of the buildup of CO2, spring is now arriving a week earlier in the northern hemisphere than it did 20 years ago. So by all indicators, it is happening now. It is due to our burning of coal and oil. We need to switch our energy diets. And there are very few uncertainties about the science. The real uncertainties are about our institutions, our economics, and how we change the way we basically live.
Very special about your journalistic investigation is you've been pointing the finger at the oil, at the coal industries, charging them with lying, with attempting to bamboozle people to believe that global warming isn't happening.
I would say it's more than attempting. I'd say they've been very effective. I can give you a couple of examples of the kind of campaigns they've mounted. There's a large coal operation called Western Fuels. It's a $400 million coal operation. In their 1991 annual report, they were very candid. They said, we want to attack mainstream science. These findings that I referred to come from a body of more than 2,000 scientists reporting to the UN. The coal industry basically enlisted 3 scientists who are skeptical about this. They're called greenhouse skeptics. In '91, they launched a public relations program which called for TV and radio and newspaper interviews by these 3 skeptics. And the strategy papers for that campaign are very explicit. It says the campaign is designed to reposition global warming as theory rather than fact, and more specifically, the campaign targets older, less educated men and young, low-income women in districts that get their electricity from coal and preferably have a member on the House Energy Committee. This is not subtle. They followed that up with a $250,000 video, a propaganda video. This was shown all over the Bush White House. It was shown in the capitals of OPEC. And basically the argument of the video is warming is good for us. If we increase the temperature, we can have more plant growth in the far north. That will help us produce more food to feed an expanding population. Unfortunately, there are two very critical omissions to that video. The first one is the bugs. Of all the systems of nature, one of the most sensitive to temperature changes is insects, and a slight degree of warming will trigger an explosion of crop-destroying and disease-spreading insects. The other omission from that particular video that I think is more unconscionable is this: the same degree of warming that may increase plant growth in far northern Canada will decimate crops in the tropical regions where most of the world's poor and hungry people live. A half-degree increase will cause a big drop-off in the rice yields in Southeast Asia. It will cause a drop of 20% in India's wheat crop, and this is in a country where a third of the population, about 300 million people, live in extreme poverty.
Jump to the chase in terms of what the viewer can do. I mean, here the viewer is hearing about the debate, well, being rigged by industry, as far as industry can get away with it. Government talking the talk a bit, but not walking the talk. But what does somebody at home do about this situation, which in fact is affecting every man, woman, and child on the planet today?
It's a very tough question. Unlike a lot of other environmental problems, I don't think this one is susceptible by our changing our lifestyles. I do not advocate people riding bicycles and sitting at home in the dark. I think the changes that have to happen at an institutional level, and that requires government leadership. So, for instance, it's interesting that recently there have even been some splits in the fossil fuel community. British Petroleum acknowledged that climate change is very serious and they want to make a big investment in solar. The president of General Motors called for carbon taxes and said he foresees the end of the internal combustion engine. Shell said they want to invest $500 million in renewables, but all these executives say, at least off the record, and some of them on the record, that for this kind of energy transition to succeed, they need the help of governments. They need governments to level the corporate playing field, to require all the energy companies to basically defossilize their energy supplies. Otherwise, the British Petroleum, let's say, solar investment, or the Shell solar investment will be a money loser as their competitors sit back and keep using oil and coal. And unless there is a mandatory binding regulatory protection imposed by the world's governments, this transition won't happen. And even the enlightened interests within the fossil fuel community won't be able to accomplish what they know they need to do. You ask me what citizens can do, and that's a real tough question. There's one legislative change that could be made in the U.S., and if any senator or congressman had the courage to propose it, I would definitely urge citizens to rally behind that candidate. This is a very simple concept to understand. The U.S. government today spends $25 billion a year subsidizing coal and oil. If all those subsidies and tax credits or incentives were put behind basically the commercialization of fuel cells and windmills and solar energy and so forth, it would give them the jump start to become players in the global industry. They would achieve economies of scale. They would immediately become competitive with coal and oil, but no politician has yet had the courage to do that. The interests of the fossil fuel lobby in Congress are extremely powerful. And what a lot of senators and congressmen have said to me is, we need an upwelling of political support from the grassroots to counteract the pressure and the money of the fossil fuel lobby. There's one conundrum here, and it's unfortunate. Most activist groups mobilize around a local issue, around a local toxic waste plant or an asphalt plant or something. The global environment, unfortunately, is everyone's second home, and therefore there is not a lot of grassroots support for a global change, and that really is what's required for congressmen and senators to begin to take measures that would really be effective here.
The heat is on. This has been Enviro Close Up. Thanks for watching.